The message arrived on a slow morning, the kind that usually feels harmless. I was standing in the kitchen, rinsing rice in a steel bowl, sunlight spilling across the counter like it had nowhere else to be. The house was calm. Too calm. My phone buzzed beside the sink, and without thinking, I wiped my hands and reached for it. When you raise a child alone, their name on your screen never feels ordinary. It still carries weight. Hope. But what I read didn't feel like hope. Please stop involving yourself in our personal matters. It's making my wife uncomfortable. We need distance. No greeting. No warmth. No Amy. Just a statement. Sharp. Final. I read it twice, then a third time, as if repetition might soften it. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe she had written it. Maybe I was reading it wrong. But the words didn't change. They sat there, cold and deliberate, like they had been rehearsed. I placed the phone face down and leaned against the counter. My chest felt tight. Not angry, just stunned. I remembered the nights I slept sitting up when he was sick. The mornings I skipped meals so he could eat better. The years I quietly sent money when he moved out, never asking where it went, never mentioning it again. I remembered the promises he made as a boy, how he said he would never leave me alone. And now, somehow, I had crossed a line without knowing where it was drawn. What hurt wasn't being asked for space. Space is natural. What hurt was how easily I had been turned into an intrusion. As if my care had become a burden overnight. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. I realized then that explaining myself would only make me smaller. And love that requires defense is already wounded. So I chose silence. That evening, I ate dinner alone at the small table near the window. The food tasted fine, but the air felt heavy. I kept thinking about how someone you build your entire life around can suddenly speak to you like you're an inconvenience. Before bed, I opened my banking app. My finger hovered over the screen. For years, I had helped without being asked, rent once, groceries another time, school fees when things were tight. I never called it support. I called it love. That night, something became painfully clear. My generosity had slowly turned into an expectation. My sacrifices had blended into the background. I cried quietly, not out of rage, but out of understanding. The kind that settles deep and doesn't leave quickly. The next morning, I moved through the house like a guest in my own life. I cleaned. I made tea. I watched dust float through sunlight. I didn't reach out. I didn't call. Because a voice inside me, soft but firm, said, respect isn't begged for. It's recognized. The days passed in silence. At first, it felt unbearable. Then, instructive. Folding clothes felt like touching memories. Each shirt reminded me of a different version of my son, small, hopeful, dependent. And I wondered how someone could erase years with a single sentence. I considered reaching out again. For my grandson. For peace. For closure. But every imagined conversation ended the same way, with me apologizing for loving too much. So I stopped. One afternoon, I sat by the window watching people pass by, realizing how much of my life I had spent bending so others wouldn't break. And still, that bending hadn't secured my place in their world. Pain didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became clarity. I stopped sending money. Quietly. Without announcement. Not as punishment, but as protection. I needed to know who I was without being useful. Weeks later, there was a knock on the door. Hope rose instinctively, then settled back down where it belonged. They stood there, my son and his wife. Polite? Awkward. My grandson clung to his mother's hand, unaware of the tension hanging between us. We just wanted to talk, my son said, too casually. No apology. No acknowledgement. I invited them in. Tea was poured. Silence stretched. Then it came. Things were difficult. Expenses. Rent. Pressure. I listened. Calm. Still. And when he finished, I spoke gently. I understand your struggles, I said. But I've learned something important. Love doesn't mean constant giving. And support shouldn't come at the cost of self-respect. I can't help this way anymore. The room went quiet. They didn't argue. They didn't insist. Because deep down, they already knew. When they left, I felt something unexpected, not triumph, not bitterness. Relief. Months passed. My life became slower, fuller. I read. I planted flowers. I took walks without urgency. Silence stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling like space. One evening, my grandson ran up to me with a crumpled drawing. I hugged him, kissed his hair, and that was enough. No transactions. No expectations. Just love. That night, lying in bed, I understood the lesson I had resisted for years. Loving deeply does not mean losing yourself. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. And dignity, once reclaimed, changes everything. My life was quiet, but it was whole. And for the first time in a long while, it truly felt like my own.